Not only will these think tanks and organizations publish their plans out in the open, but they'll pretty much tell you exactly what they're doing, and they'll dress it up in kind of flowery, altruistic language, but they will tell you.
Capitalism, as we know it, is dead.
The World Economic Forum openly say that our objective is to be trustees for the global commons. When it was first coined, the term the global commons, it was only meant to mean the oceans, Antarctica, the atmosphere, and space, but they've just been adding to it. The most recent thing to become part of the global commons is information. These are the resources that all human beings need to survive. The global commons is shorthand for everything. So all the things that we need to survive, that no one owns, but we need to survive.
And now, in a desperate attempt to fill 24 hours of programming, here's some that happened somewhere today. We've got some footage here of the which began just after 3 o'clock this afternoon.
They went back and forth for 5 minutes about how important it is to get the private sector and the public sector to trust each other.
We need enormous trust between the private sector and the public sector for this to actually work.
Building trust with the public, and we can't do any of this unless we convince the public that they can trust us. And it was just very much, like, how do we propagandize these people?
They need to convince us to go along with it.
In the Great Reset, about the need for a new social contract.
The need for a new social contract, because this will build trust.
Am I the only one hella creeped out by these guys sitting around scheming on how to win our trust?
And trustees has got a very specific legal meaning.
They are the only ones granted authority to access the funds in the trust, write checks, approve distributions, and conduct business on behalf of the trust assets.
And who are your trustees? Roche isn't just an agenda contributor, but Hoffman actually sits on the board next to Klaus Schwab. Andre Hoffman is also a member of the Royal Institute of International Affairs and senior advisor at the Chatham House think tank. Here is a published list of everyone who attended the World Economic Meetings each year. Going back to 2019, we still see Roche. What role does Roche play in the Great Reset? And what other areas is Roche involved in?
Climate change.
Might expect to be reading about the pandemic, but would be surprised to see that the words climate change are mentioned over 40 times.
Yeah, it's all part of the same scam. So this goes back to stakeholder capitalism. So stakeholder capitalism is at the heart of the new global international monetary and financial system. And it's built upon the idea of sustainable development. So that is the product that you are being sold.
In addition to being an agenda contributor to the World Economic Forum, Andre Hoffman is also a member of the Club of Rome, among many other things. Now, the Club of Rome is a sort of international think tank located in Switzerland, whose main focus is climate change, although they claim they are saving humanity from multiple planetary emergencies.
Planetary emergency?
According to their website, we are in the midst of a planetary emergency, facing climate, biodiversity, and health crises. By addressing these as one integrated challenge, we can bring back balance between people, planet, and prosperity. In 1972, they published a paper called Limits to Growth, which is basically a computer model that predicts when we will destroy our own planet in the coming years.
So they put out this dodgy computer model idea that people are ultimately going to destroy the planet because they've decided that that's what's going to happen. But without it, there's not really any kind of scientific basis for this.
We got a chart.
Yeah, we've got a chart. We've done some lines, and that's what's going to happen.
And many news sources claim that we are right on schedule and right on track with the predictions made in the Limits to Growth paper. So, if the head of Roche, the owner of the COVID test, is involved in shaping public policy as a member of the Club of Rome, then I wonder what type of agenda Roche is contributing to at the World Economic Forum.
Right now, we're facing a man-made disaster of global scale, our greatest threat in thousands of years, climate change.
One of the agendas is having us all locked down to fight climate change. The head of Roche is also honorary chair at the Global Footprint Network, whose goal is to create a future where all humans can live well within the means of one world.
If we don't take action, the collapse of our civilizations and the extinction of much of the natural world is on the horizon.
Should we really be living in fear of climate change? I'm not denying the existence of climate change. I'm simply not taking responsibility for it.
How dare you?
The narrative is that we, the people, are causing the climate change with our gas-guzzling vehicles, our constant polluting of the air, and my personal favorite, the toxic CO2 that we emit from every breath we take. But the truth is, the conditions on this planet were created by various power structures over long periods of time. These different power structures control the energy production and the energy consumption of this entire planet. And they are the ones who are forcing me to put the gasoline into this vehicle.
The energy industry is probably the biggest global industry of all. Oil, gas and coal mining and prospecting are huge, expensive operations. The vested interests are enormous. Even medium to large-scale use of more conventional technologies, such as the basic electric car running on conventional battery technology, seem to have been terminated as early as possible. And if you watch the film Who Killed the Electric Car, you'll see that story laid out in 50 minutes.
Yet we're told that we're causing climate change. It's not like we're the ones who killed Stanley Meyer or all the other free energy inventors of the 21st century.
Stan Meyer, dead. Bruce De Palma, dead. Wilhelm Reich, Ari M. de Geus, James Black, Dr. Eugene Mallove, dead.
The technology exists to make all of this obsolete, yet these power structures remain.
Structures like this exist all over the planet.
In fact, these power structures are the very same ones accusing us of causing climate change. So, how did this start? The Club of Rome was founded by David Rockefeller and a wealthy Italian industrialist who was interested in global modeling, Aurelio Pecce. Now, at the same time, with the help of this Italian industrialist, scientists from all over the world and every country got together to create an organization called the IIASA.
The International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis.
Also founded in 1972 in Austria.
Gott erhalte Franz den Kaiser,
We've had some news flow surrounding Austria, of course. Austria announcing compulsory vaccinations from February the 1st and a nationwide lockdown.
The government also says that it will enforce a vaccine mandate for the entire country. Now, these are the most drastic measures so far in Europe, responding to inefficient measures to reach out to unvaccinated people to get the vaccine. The problem that a lot of governments are dealing with, and particularly in Austria right now, is that they have not managed to convince people to get the vaccine. They don't believe in the vaccine, or they don't believe in government, and therefore they don't want to take it.
Over the past 2 years, we've witnessed the transformation and creation of a technocracy.
Technocracy. So this is measuring resources right down to the individual level.
Something called stakeholder capitalism, which would shift businesses away from just profit.
They made that disastrous PR decision to put that video out that said, you will own nothing and you will be happy. So in other words, we will be in charge of everything. This is technocracy. Technocracy.
A system of government in which the decision makers are selected on the basis of their expertise or scientific knowledge.
There's a historical reason why I'm saying these specific words.
100 years ago, French Freemason Marquise d'Albadre developed the term synarchy, the association of everyone with everyone else, into a political philosophy, which proved influential in politics and the occult. Marquise viewed synarchy as the most ideal form of government, which gave an important role to secret societies who safeguarded the government from behind the scenes, a role that has been fulfilled throughout history, from the Rosicrucians and Knights Templars in medieval Europe to the Freemasonic lodges of modern America.
a fraternal organization that originated in Europe. George Washington had been a Mason. The sitting president of the United States, Andrew Jackson, was a Mason. William Morgan decided he was going to publish all the deep, dark secrets.
The Masons abducted Morgan. They took him to Niagara Falls, and he was never seen again. The first third party in American history.
The anti-Mason party was not on the political scene very long.
What it was a revolt basically against the elite classes.
Today, we live in a synarchy, a form of government where social, economic, and political power rests with a secret group of initiates.
There is a group of people at the very, very upper echelon of the economic strata who do have a belief system which is very different from most of us.
Aristocratic occultists who operate behind the scenes unknown to the public. Now, this is much different than an oligarchy where the elite is known or could be known by the public. Now, the internet is full of truth seekers, researchers, whistleblowers, and filmmakers attempting to expose this hidden power. Most of these folks use a pronoun to describe this shadow government.
They.
They.
They have created a repressive society, and we are their unwitting accomplices. They are safe as long as they are not discovered.
Well, who's they?
We've gotten used to hearing names like Bill Gates, Tony Fauci, China, Russia, the Jews, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds. But how are these names popularized? If there is a hidden power operating in the shadows, then surely the culprits would not be so easily identifiable. In this next section, you're going to hear names that some of you have likely never heard before. This is Prince Carlo, Duke of Castro, head of the House of Bourbon Two Sicilies, a member of Italian nobility and good pals with former President Donald Trump. He's also Grand Master of the Sacred Military Constantinian Order of St. George. Prince Carlo's nephew is Jean-Christophe Napoleon Bonaparte, and he works for Blackstone. Keep in mind that although these guys refer to themselves as princes and dukes, they are not royalty. The Italian government banned monarchies and exiled many of these family members.
In 1946, the Kingdom of Italy ended. The last king of Italy never abdicated the throne, and during his exile continued the traditions of the Savoy orders until his death in 1983.
Vittorio Emanuele, Prince of Naples, Duke of Savoy, who also likes to share his father's title, King of Italy. But again, he's neither a king nor a prince. But he is the descendant of the very powerful Savoy family.
The Royal House of Savoy was Europe's longest reigning dynasty. The family's sovereignty dates back about 1,000 years. Its lineage extends through an unbroken succession of more than 40 counts, dukes, and kings. In 2005, the Savoy Foundation became a non-governmental organization in roster consultative status with the United Nations Economic and Social Council. This important role enables the foundation to participate in the medical, poverty relief, and educational work of the United Nations, and provides an excellent opportunity to form strategic alliances with the international philanthropic community with which the Savoy orders are active.
Vittorio Emanuele. He's been kicked out of Italy and currently lives in Geneva, Switzerland.
His Royal Highness Prince Victor Emmanuel of Savoy, who became then, and remains today, head of the Royal House of Savoy and Grand Master of its dynastic and hereditary orders of knighthood and merit.
And runs the Sovereign Military Order of the Knights of Malta, as well as Grand Master of the Royal Order of Merit of the House of Savoy.
And hereditary Grand Master of the Supreme Order of the Most Holy Annunciation and the Order of Saints Maurice and Lazarus, the Prince also confers merit orders of the Royal House, the Civil Order of Savoy for civil merit, and the Order of Merit of Savoy.
Who, by the way, was so impressed in 2001 with the performance of Rudy Giuliani that he was knighted not only by the House of Windsor, but the House of Savoy. What an honor it must have been to be given an award by someone charged and acquitted of racketeering, political corruption, conspiracy, exploitation of prostitution, and even murder. Yeah, this man got away with killing Dirk Hammer, the son of Reich Hammer, the creator of German New Medicine. Now, the murder of Hammer's son is not the only horrific crime Vittorio has gotten away with. He was also a member of the clandestine Propaganda du Masonic Lodge, the state within a state responsible for high-level corruption and political manipulation.
An Italian Masonic lodge so shady that it was disowned by the regular Freemasons.
P2 was implicated in numerous crimes and mysteries, including the collapse of the Vatican-affiliated Banco Ambrosiano Bank and the mafia carried out murder of Roberto Calvi, aka God's banker for the Vatican.
In fact, the Vatican was a 10% shareholder in the bank. Calvi enjoyed a close working relationship with many high-ups in the church. In 1978, Banco Ambrosiano became embroiled in scandal. This would ultimately lead to the collapse of the bank, and Calvi being convicted in 1981, he would leave Italy on a false passport. A postal worker crossing Blackfriars Bridge notices a body. The victim is identified as one Roberto Calvi. Was it P2? Roberto Calvi was a member of P2.
P2 has been described as a shadow government, with several members being confirmed CIA agents, as well as prominent journalists, industrialists, military leaders, prime ministers,
including that one,
bankers, members of parliament, heads of intelligence services, you name it. The Parliamentary Commission of Inquiry concluded that P2 was a secret criminal organization operating in contravention of Article 18 of the Constitution of Italy that banned secret associations. Now, the European Court of Human Rights ruled that Italy is violating the rights of individuals by banning secret societies. Nevertheless, the Italian government wanted nothing to do with them or monarchies.
Prince Victor Emmanuel continues a millennial family tradition of rewarding individuals for their achievements and service.
At first, I thought it was strange that Giuliani would be knighted in Italy, especially considering his work against the Italian mafia.
With an organized crime epidemic sweeping the city, 1983 proved the perfect time for a bold prosecutor to re-enter New York and orchestrate his meteoric ascent to the top. He did it by enforcing the rules, although he didn't always play by them.
Two of them, I know, will be able to post bail immediately. Castellano, and Fat Tony. I mean, a couple million, plus a couple $1 million.
Then I realized Giuliani is an Italian name.
I think if you're Italian, there has to be an interest in opera, just as in your chromosomes.
So is Cuomo, de Blasio, Gottlieb, Pelosi. In fact, there's a lot of Italian names in American politics. DeSantis, Pompeo, Papadopoulos, Garcetti, Cruz, McCarthy, Panetta, Podesta. In fact, Podesta was the name given to the highest level of government during the Middle Ages in Italy.
Images from Italy are usually a window into the past, but recently its empty canals, tourist sites, and streets provided a startling glimpse of the future.
And then I thought Italy was the first country after China that became overwhelmed when the pandemic started.
In the weeks before the U.S. became the world's epicenter, the globe was keeping a close eye on Italy.
After the pandemic hit Italy and the country went into lockdown, more than 200 high-security inmates, including several mafia bosses, were released.
Why were more than 200 mafia members released back into their homes?
According to the Huffington Post, Italy's largest bank is now the mafia.
All right, today we're talking about the famous Committee of 300 book by the author Dr. John Coleman. I've read this book. I've read a couple of different other John Coleman's books. It's a classic globalist book and important information. in it. I don't agree with everything that all of his conclusions, but nevertheless, very good book to add to your library and to read. Here's some other books by him. Check this out on Amazon. You got Freemasonry from A to Z, Illuminati in America, Diplomacy by Deception. Wrote a book about the Rothschild dynasty, a history of them. It's got a lot of other stuff. If you come over here to archive.org, there's a whole section devoted to him. It's called the John Coleman Ultimate Collection. Check that out, and you can download all these books here for free. Just click on them and download the PDF or whatever suits your reading needs. But that's what we're going to be talking about today. Committee of 300 by Dr. John Coleman. This is a video concerning the conspiracy globalist book called The Committee of 300 by Dr. John Coleman. The book exposes an ultra-secretive group of roughly 300 families that he says rules the world. He identifies them, accurately in my mind, as the black nobility. Dr. Coleman claims he worked for British intelligence for most of his career, and this gives us the impression that he's speaking from an insider perspective. In the foreword of his book, he says, quote, "In my career as a professional intelligence officer, I had many occasions to access highly classified documents. But during service as a political science officer in the field in Angola, West Africa, I had the opportunity to view a series of top-secret classified documents which were unusually explicit. What I saw filled me with anger and resentment and launched me on a course from which I have not deviated, namely to uncover what power it is that controls and manages the British and United States governments. This book is full of names of people and organizations and secret societies, and I will get to some of that in the presentation. However, I can't cover them all, for that would make this presentation way too long." On page 152, Dr. Coleman gives us an idea of who we are talking about when we reference the name the Committee of 300. Quote, "Included in the membership are the old families of the European black nobility, the American Eastern establishment, in Freemason hierarchy and the Order of Skull and Bones, the Illuminati, or as it is known by the committee, Moriah Conquering Wind, the Mumma Group, the National and World Council of Churches, the Circle of Initiates, the Nine Unknown Men, Lucis Trust, Jesuit Liberation Theologists, the Order of the Elders of Zion, the Nazi Princes, International Monetary Fund, the Bank of International Settlements, the United Nations, the Central, British Couture Coranti, Italian P2 Masonry, especially those in the Vatican hierarchy, the Central Intelligence Agency, Tavistock Institute selected personnel, various members of leading foundations and insurance companies named in the lists that follow, the Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank, the Milner Group Roundtable, Sini Foundation, German Marshall Fund, Ditchley Foundation, NATO, Club of Rome, Environmentalists, the Order of St. John of Jerusalem, One World Government Church, Socialist International, Black Order, Thule Society, Annan Herb Rosicrucianists, the Great Superius Ones, and literally hundreds of other organizations, unquote. If we want to know the goals of this Committee of 300, we should just start reading the list on page 23, provided by Dr. Coleman. Quote, "What are the goals of the secret elite group, the inheritors of Illuminism, Moriah Conquering Wind, the cult of Dionysus, the cult of Isis, Catharism, Bogomilism, the elite group that also calls itself the Olympians? They truly believe they are equal in power and stature to the legendary gods of Olympus, who have, like Lucifer their god, set themselves about our true God. Absolutely believe they have been charged with implementing the following divine right. Number 1, a one world government, new world order with a unified church and monetary system under their direction. Number 2, the utter destruction of all national identity and national pride. Number 3, the destruction of religion, and more especially the Christian religion, with one exception, their own creation mentioned above. Number 4. Control of each and every person through means of mind control and what Brzezinski called technotronics, which create human-like robots and a system of terror besides which Felix Dzerzhinsky's Red Terror will look like children at play. Number 5. An end to all industrialization and the production of nuclear-generated electric power in what they call the post-industrial zero-growth society. Exempted are the computer and service industries. United States industries that remain will be exported to countries such as Mexico, where abundant slave labor is available. Unemployables in the wake of industrial destruction will either become opium, heroin, or cocaine addicts, or become statistics in the elimination process we know today as Global 2000, Agenda 21, or 2030. Legalization of drugs and pornography. Number 7. Depopulation of large cities according to the trial run carried out by Pol Pot regime in Cambodia. It is interesting to note that Pol Pot's genocidal plans were drawn up here in the United States by one of the Club of Rome's research foundations. Number 8. Suppression of all scientific development except for those deemed beneficial by the committee, especially targeted as nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. Particularly hated are the fusion experiments presently being scorned and ridiculed by the committee and its jackals of the press. Development of the fusion torch would blow the committee's conception of limited natural resources right out of the window. A fusion torch properly used could create unlimited, untapped natural resources for the most ordinary substances. Number 9. Caused by means of limited wars in the advanced countries and by means of starvation and diseases in third world countries. The death of 3 billion people by the year 2000. People they call useless eaters. The Committee of 300 commissioned Cyrus Vance to write a paper on the subject of how best to bring about such genocide. The paper was produced under the title The Global 2000 Report and was accepted and approved for action by President Carter for and on behalf of the U.S. government, and accepted by Edwin Muskie, the Secretary of State. Under the terms of the Global 2000 Report, the population of the United States is to be reduced by 100 million by the year 2050. Number 10. To weaken the moral fiber of the nation and to demoralize workers in the labor class by creating mass unemployment. As jobs dwindle due to the post-industrial zero-growth policies introduced by the Club of Rome, demoralized and discouraged workers will resort to alcohol and drugs. The youth of the land will be encouraged by means of rock music and drugs to rebel against the status quo, thus undermining and eventually destroying the family unit. In this regard, the Committee of 300 commissioned Tavistock Institute to prepare a blueprint as to how this could best be achieved. Tavistock directed Stanford Research to undertake the work under the direction of Professor Willis Harman. This work later became known as the Aquarian Conspiracy. Number 11. To keep people everywhere from deciding their own destinies by means of one created crisis after another, and then managing such crises. This will confuse and demoralize the population to the extent where, faced with too many choices, apathy on a massive scale will result. In the case of the United States, an agency for crisis management is already in place. It is called the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or more commonly known as FEMA. Number 12. To introduce new cults and continue to boost those already functioning, which includes rock music gangsters, such as the filthy, degenerate Mick Jagger's Rolling Stones, a gangster group much favored by European black nobility, and all of the Tavistock created groups which began with the Beatles. To continue to build up the cult of Christian fundamentalism, begun by the British East India Company's servant Darby, which will be misused to strengthen the Zionist state of Israel through identifying with the Jews through the myth of God's chosen people, and by donating very substantial amounts of money to what they mistakenly believe is a religious cause in the furtherance of Christianity. Number 13. To press for the spread of religious cults such as the Muslim Brotherhood, Muslim fundamentalism, Sikhs, and to carry out experiments of the Jim Jones and Son of Sam type of murders. It is worth noting that the late Ayatollah Khomeini was a creation of British intelligence Military Intelligence Division 6, commonly known as MI6, as reported in my 1985 work, What Really Happened in Iran. Number 14, to export religious liberation ideas around the world so as to undermine all existing religious, but more especially the Christian religion. This began with the Jesuit liberation theology, which brought about the downfall of the Somoza family rule in Nicaragua, and which is today destroying El Salvador, now 25 years into a civil war, Costa Rica, and Honduras. Number 15, to cause total collapse of the world's economies and engender total political chaos. Number 16, to take control of all foreign and domestic policies of the United States. Number 17, to give the fullest support to supranational institutions such as the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, the Bank of International Settlements, the World Court, and as far as possible, make local institutions of lesser effect by gradually phasing them out or bringing them under the mantle of the United Nations. Number 18, penetrate and subvert all governments and work from within them to destroy the sovereign integrity of nations represented by them. Number 19, organize a worldwide terrorist apparatus and negotiate with terrorists whenever terrorist activities take place. Number 20, take control of education in America with the intent and purpose of utterly and completely destroying it. So that is the end of the list. And it's the same old tired communist plan of destruction of the power of the people by destroying our ability to make wealth.
Socialism is a failure.
Speaking of H.G. Wells, another globalist writer, Coleman says on page 154, quote, "There will be no middle class, only rulers and servants. All laws will be uniform under a legal system of world courts, practicing the same unified code of laws, backed up by a one-world government police force and a one-world unified military to enforce laws in all former countries where no national boundaries shall exist." That sounds like the UCC. The system will be on the basis of a welfare state. Those who are obedient and subservient to the one-world government will be rewarded with the means to live. Those who are rebellious will simply be starved to death or be declared outlaws, thus a target for anyone who wishes to kill them. Privately owned firearms or weapons of any kind will be prohibited, unquote. So, the overall thrust of this book has to do with mind control, culture creation, and subversion. Coleman shows us how this interlocking group of institutions and people work together on both sides of the political spectrum to make public opinion, and how about we are up against an enemy that has totally infiltrated our world. He states on page 31, quote, "As I have so often stated, we have been misled into believing that the problem I am talking about has its origins in Moscow. We have been brainwashed into believing that communism is the greatest danger we Americans are facing." He's referring to the Cold War in that period when Russia was the biggest enemy, and they're doing the same exact thing today with Trump. This is simply not so. The greatest danger arises from the mass of traitors in our midst. Our Constitution warns us to be watchful of the enemy within our gates. These enemies are the servants of the Committee of 300 who occupy high positions within our governmental structure. The United States is where we must begin our fight to turn back the tide threatening to engulf us, and where we must meet and defeat those internal conspirators, unquote. This book was published in 1992, just after the Reagan presidency, and Dr. Coleman shows that his so-called conservative presidency was in fact full of Fabian socialists. On page 34, quote, "Committee of 300, through its many affiliated organizations, was able to nullify the Reagan presidency. Here's what Stuart Butler of the Heritage Foundation had to say on the subject. Quote, the right thought it had won in 1980, but in fact it had lost." Unquote. What Butler was referring to was the situation in which the right found itself when it realized that every single position of importance in the Reagan administration was filled by Fabianists, appointees recommended by the Heritage Foundation. Butler went on to say that Heritage would use right-wing ideas to impose left-wing radical principles upon the United States. The same radical ideas which Sir Peter Vickers Hall, top Fabianist in the U.S. and the #1 man at Heritage, had been openly discussing during the election year, unquote. So as per usual, there is a Hegelian dialectic going on in this situation. We must remember that all of politics is no different. They may say that they are liberal or conservative, or a socialist or a fiscal conservative. Well, what they really are is a bunch of lying, thieving scumbags who love to deceive us into giving up our God-given rights and sell ourselves into slavery for their corporate New World Order. One of, if not the most powerful tool the New World Order has, is mind control, and the ability to appeal to humans' natural inclination to have herd mentality, to manufacture a population who doesn't even care if they get assaulted every day in every way. Dr. Coleman mentions who, in his eyes, were the four most influential in this science. On page 146, he says, "Apart from John Rawlings Rees, no two men made such difference to world politics and world events as shaped as Tavistock than Edward Bernays, the double nephew of Sigmund Freud, and Kurt Lewin. A third man must be included here, although he was never on the faculty at Tavistock, and I refer to Willy Moonsberg, whose propaganda methods and applications so crucial to the modern age of mass communication earned him the title, the greatest propagandist in the world. Undoubtedly the most brilliant man of his era, he began his work before World War I. Moonsberg was responsible for sanitizing the Bolsheviks after they overthrew the Romanov dynasty." John Rawlings Rees was born in about 1890. His occupations include the director of Tavistock Clinic, the president of the World Federation for Mental Health. He wrote some notable works: Health of the Mind, The Shaping of Psychiatry by War, Modern Practice in Psychological Medicine, interwar work at the Tavistock Institute. Let's see, Rees was one of the key figures at the original Tavistock Clinic and became its medical director from 1933, and he began to make plans to establish an institute of medical psychology with beds and more opportunities to train people in psychiatric methods, and bought a site in Bloomsbury to build it, but his plans were halted by the outbreak of World War II. Okay, then he went to World War II, and in 1941, a group of psychiatrists at Tavistock Institute saw that the right questions were asked in Parliament in order to secure the means to try new measures. As a result, they were asked to join the Directorate of Army Psychiatry, and did so as a group. So this guy was, he was English, and he was in contact with Rudolf Hess and the Nazis through his work at Tavistock. So that says a lot. And then, of course, he went to work on Operation Phoenix, more mind control, and then he went on to become the president of the World Federation for Mental Health. So this guy was very, very important and very influential. The World Federation for Mental Health was founded, and Rees was elected as the first president. This organization is now a non-governmental organization with former consultative status at the United Nations. Okay. So this dude is incredibly connected, and this is who Coleman considers to be one of the most influential people on the whole MK Ultra mind control. Another key player was Edward Bernays, who is credited by Coleman as the forefather of modern propaganda. From his Wikipedia page, quote, "Of his many books, Crystallizing Public Opinion, 1923, and Propaganda, 1928, gained special attention as early efforts to define and theorize the field of public relation." Citing works of writers such as Gustav Le Bon, Wilfrid Lippmann, and his own double uncle Sigmund Freud, he described the masses as irrational and subject to herd instinct, and outlined how skilled practitioners could use crowd psychology and psychoanalysis to control them in desirable ways, unquote. Kurt Lewin. The third man Dr. Coleman mentions is Kurt Lewin. This is from Wikipedia as well. Quote, Lewin was a German-American psychologist known as one of the modern pioneers of social, organizational, and applied psychology in the United States. When Hitler came to power in 1933, Lewin moved to England and then America. In that year, he met Eric Trist of the London Tavistock Clinic. Trist was impressed with his theories and went on to use them in his studies, unquote. Quote, Lewin tried to come up with the way identity was constructed from standpoint and perspectives. These were the beginnings of what ended up developing into groupthink. Lewin started to become quite interested in how ideas were created and then perpetuated by the mentality of a group, unquote.
I don't want to sound like a fatalist, because I'm not. I'm absolutely convinced that ultimately the principles of freedom shall prevail. I know that that will happen. I may not live to see it. I won't live to see it. But truth cannot be extinguished. And our great society promotes the discovery of truth, not the suppression of it. And those of you who are involved in the climate change issue know that it is the goal of the international community, those who believe in the Rousseau socialist philosophy of governance. It is their chief objective to suppress truth in order for the propaganda to prevail that supports their power.
As you said, that strap in, like tighten your seatbelt. It's going to be crazy.
In a document called The First Global Revolution, authored by Alexander King and Bertrand Schneider, on pages 104 and 105, it stated, "In searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine and the like would fit the bill. All these dangers, of course, will be caused by human intervention that will require a global response." That's the origin of global warming, ladies and gentlemen.
Some people involved may actually have a pure heart and believe in it the way you do. Most do not. Those who want more government controls are never going to come out and say it. They've got to trick you into it. But the more you follow the usual suspects, the more you'll recognize their hallmarks, and the more you can ring the bell and protect your own community.
There should be a better coordination between the United Nations Central Organization and things like the UNDP and its organs and the World Bank and the IMF, which had drifted way apart from the original intention, which was to work in coordination with the United Nations rather than be totally independent, rather arrogant, looking down the nose at what these people did up in New York while we ran the world essentially through our big money pockets. I just hope that in 5 to 10 years' time we will be at the bottom end of a political leadership trough at the moment. I'm hoping it will come up and we will get political leadership. But we need international structures of far greater power and authority and respect.
That I have a pretty straightforward answer. It depends on whether Donald Trump is re-elected as US president next year or not.
In a document called The First Global Revolution, authored by Alexander King and Bertrand Schneider, on pages 104 and 105, it stated, "In searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine and the like would fit the bill. All these dangers, of course, will be caused by human intervention that will require a global response. That's the origin of global warming, ladies and gentlemen."
Peter, what are we seeing on this wall?
Well, you're seeing the history of much of the last 60 years. in terms of technology and ideas that have had a huge impact in the world. Jay Forrester passed away last fall, and about 3 weeks ago we had a celebration here of his life. So this goes from the 1930s, in his early, life, 40s. He was actually, if anybody could be called the inventor of the modern digital computer, Jay would be it. He led the team at MIT that built the first general purpose digital computer. That's stuff you see over here. How IBM got involved. IBM was their contractor. That's how IBM got into computation, into digital computers.
It's not some science fantasy effect from 2001. This electronic display emanating from Australia's largest computer is a picture of the condition, past, present and future of planet Earth. The program was originally devised by a scientist working from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Jay Forrester. It was developed under the auspices of the Club of Rome by an MIT research team to present a complex model of the world and what we humans are doing to it. The program, called World 1, doesn't pretend to be a precise forecast. What it does for the first time in man's history on the planet is to look at the world as one system. It shows that Earth cannot sustain present population and industrial growth for much more than a few decades. It shows that simply cleaning up our car exhausts and making some small effort to limit our families simply isn't enough. It's like an electronic guided tour of our global behavior since 1900 and where that behavior will lead us. Well, this is the printed version of what we've just seen on the television screen. What looks at first to be just a maze of computer characteristics is really a system of very simple graphs which project what's going to happen to the planet over the next 150 years if we don't do something drastic to stop it. Down the left-hand side of the graph is the date, 1900, 1940, 1980, 2020, right down to 2060. Now, each of these lines of letters represents a curve showing some aspect of the condition of the planet. The further out this way they go, the greater that figure is. The further this way, the less. For example, P represents population. So here it is at 1900. And then it comes up to 1940, it starts to take off. Here we are at 1980, up to the turn of the century, and then it starts to peter off. Let's now have a look at this next curve, the Q curve, which is the quality of life. And this is represented by, for example, the amount of space people have, the amount of money they have to spend, the amount of food they have to eat. Now, it increases rapidly up to 1940, but from 1940 on, the quality of life diminishes. And here we are about the turn of the century, and we come up to the year 2020, and it's really come right back. More people, of course, means that you start to chew up your supply of natural resources. And this is this curve here, the N curve, that shows that slowly but steadily the pool of natural wealth in the world, natural resources, minerals, oil and so on, is slowly but steadily diminishing. So this is the situation. As population increases, the quality of life decreases and the supply of natural resources decreases. But have a look at this curve here. This is called the Z curve, and it represents pollution. Now, predictably enough, as the population increases up to 1980, pollution increases. There's more rubbish. But from 1980 to the year 2020, pollution really takes off. This is assuming, of course, that we don't do anything about it. So the year 2020, the condition of the planet starts to become highly critical. And if we don't do anything about it, this is what's going to happen. The quality of life is going to go right back to practically zero. Pollution is going to become so serious, right out here, that it will start to kill people. So the population will diminish. Right back here, less than it was in the year 1900. And at this stage, around about the year 2040, 2050, civilized life as we know it on this planet will cease to exist. Well, hopefully, of course, it won't be allowed to happen. But it's taken this kind of shock treatment to nudge governments into doing something.
So one of the kind of milestones captured in Kelvy's wall here is a book called World Dynamics, which led to another book, the popularized version, called The Limits to Growth. It was the first complete model of the global industrialization process, how economic growth interacts with all the environmental and social constraints. So today, virtually all the issues we talk about in the general heading of sustainability were foreshadowed.
I came back to MIT, walked into the office on Monday, and it was announced that a group I never heard about before, the Club of Rome, would be coming to MIT to learn about our computer modeling methods because they were interested in doing some kind of global study.
In 1972, Dennis Meadows was the first to be assigned with such future studies, financed by Volkswagen Foundation.
Then I put together a team of 16 people, and we worked for almost 2 years and produced the work. Limits to Growth was not the goal of the project. The goal was a very big scientific report, and Limits was written as a afterthought. What we said is that exponential growth will take us to the limits very soon. Actually, if you look at our book, our 1972 book, although we showed many different scenarios, all of them show that growth stops sometime in the period of 2020 to, let's say, 2060. So soon.
This little sketch here is the first world dynamics model that Jay sketched out sitting in an airplane seat flying back from Germany, where the Volkswagen Foundation had hosted the first gathering of what became the Club of Rome. The Club of Rome, which still exists, was the sponsor of the Limits to Growth project. Jay sketched out the model, the system dynamics model, the airplane flight back, and about 2 or 3 months later he had a simulated model, and about 2 or 3 months after that, a book. That was kind of midway in Jay's career, and the right half of this really chases out the second half, the last 40 years. Jay lived to be 98 years old, where a lot of us got involved. So a lot of the sustainability issues, the seeds were planted back here with the Limits to Growth, but then on the right side of the wall, you see the work on climate change, you see the work on education. We'll talk maybe a little later about the Global Sustainable Food Laboratory, this whole unfolding that kind of occurred as a consequence of the kind of seeds Jay had planted. It's quite remarkable.
The Club of Rome has been described as a crisis think tank, which specialises in crisis creation. The main purpose of this think tank was to formulate a crisis that would unite the world and condition us to the idea of global solutions to local problems.
You know, again, it's easy to criticize, but if you think we're trying to invent something that's never existed, which is, you might say, a commons-based, socially oriented and sensitive governance structures that can function globally as well as locally, and how to create a new harmonious ecosystem between the local and the global.
You disturb the system over the threshold of the so-called tipping points. At the end of the century, we will have about 2 billion people living on Earth.
Food production is, of course, what we're really going to suffer from.
Rather than 9 billion, which is the usual number used in demographics around the world. We will lose soil, erosion, desertification, and we won't have the phosphate to feed 9 billion people. So it will be far less. Far less.
More than 11,000 scientists signed a petition calling for population control as a means of combating climate change. In an article published Tuesday in the journal Bioscience, the scientists wrote that planet Earth is, quote, facing a climate emergency. They argued that population control was a necessary response to this emergency, writing, quote, the world population must be stabilized and ideally gradually reduced. This ideology is dangerous because it suggests that reducing the human population is the best solution to our problems. But the petition presents no facts or data to support its claim that the human population is the cause of shrinking ice caps, rising ocean levels, and an increase in the average global surface temperature. And it doesn't show any data to prove that reducing human population could help the planet. That's just bad science. And who gets to decide which populations are controlled? The UN? Individual countries? Global intellectual elites? Elite?
The myth of overpopulation originated in England in 1798, when a vicar named Thomas Malthus, who fancied himself something of a mathematician, saw that food production increased incrementally, but people reproduced exponentially. He sat down and did some simple math, and summarily decided that the world would be out of food by 1890. He blamed reduced mortality rates, and recommended killing off the have-nots of society, lest the haves starve to death. This cry was taken up by Paul Ehrlich of Stanford University in 1968, who claimed that reckless human reproduction had overwhelmed the Earth. Massive famines would result, which would destroy, best-case scenario, 1/5 of humanity by the end of the 70s. And the planet would follow. This fear produced large donations for the newly created UNFPA, which thrives on an imagined crisis that has been both imminent and rescheduled again and again over the past 2 centuries. The truth of the matter is that every family on this planet could have a house with a yard and all live together on a landmass the size of Texas, which is really just a small corner of the planet. The population of Earth will peak in 30 years and then start to go back down. We're not overpopulated. Do the math.
For years, there's been a push to shove birth control and abortion down the throats of women in developing countries who don't want either, by the way. We don't get to pick who is desirable or useful enough to reproduce and who should be restricted in the name of the global common good. That's called eugenics, and it can lead down a slippery slope to things like ethnic cleansing and genocide. Genocide.
This is the new hockey stick, and the skyrocketing of the purple line tells us that the parallelity between CO2 concentration and temperature is an automatism.
How did we get to focus on CO2 as being this tipping point, the culprit? Because it's something we do ourselves. That's what makes it special. It is human activity. The fact is that CO2 is so beneficial in other ways. It would be crazy to try to reduce it.
We have to develop a completely different energy system around the world. We have to get rid of carbon as soon as possible. And the challenge is to invest, to research, and to develop, and to educate the world in that direction.
Global warming is merely the latest environmental scare with the exact same solutions going back 50 years. In other words, it doesn't really matter what the science of global warming. They actually have quotes. Their main figures say that. The EU Climate Commissioner said, even if we're wrong on the science, we're doing the right thing by policy. What is that policy? The UN climate chief explicitly stated, and I interviewed her on this, we seek a centralized transformation that will make life on planet Earth very different for everyone. That's the UN climate chief's explicit goal. Her assistant, a guy named Edenhofer, actually said, we will redistribute wealth by climate policy. This is not even about environmental policy anymore. They're openly talking about it. They talk about global governance.
We gradually grow in understanding. Mark my words, we do. But of course the resistance also grows. And there is a very strange phenomenon, which is that for every so-called scientific fact, we need another opinion. And why do we need that? Because the media demand so.
We've got to remember we have to be faithful as scientists. In a lot of cases, people have written that it's okay that the end justifies the means. We can make up these scary scenarios so people will listen to us, people will act. I don't think that's moral. I think we have to tell the truth as scientists. If you want to be an activist, take off your scientist hat, then make a statement as a public servant. That's no problem at all. But you cannot divorce the truth from the debate. That is the important component.
But we should be arguing about the right things, not is there or is there not climate change. It's what's the deliberate impact of this change or this change or this change, knowing that we need to decarbonize our economies. And that we're a sense of working on it together around the world. I think this particular decade, the one critical thing that I feel could really happen is we start to feel we're in it together.
We have 12 years to radically transform is about humanity. That's why we demand a new Green Deal, and we demand it right now.
People will vote if there is something worth voting for. And a Green New Deal is exactly what that is. Thank you all so much. Let's organize together. Don't settle for less.
They don't want to argue on the merits their policies. In other words, the Green New Deal, they just admitted, AOC's chief of staff said this was never about the climate. This was a increase the government kind of thing, a change the whole economy type of thing. Her former chief of staff, campaign manager, actually said a similar thing, that this was actually not about the climate. They're openly admitting that. They don't want to argue their points on the merit instead, so they use subterfuge. We only have 12 years left. We're facing a climate emergency, as cities and colleges are now comically declaring that across the world. So they don't have to deal with that. That's how global warming becomes part of the agenda tool for the regulatory state.
They've introduced through the Democratic Party and a lady called Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's kind of the progressive poster girl at the moment, something called the Green New Deal. And the Green New Deal is basically what I'm talking about. It's the centralization of power to save the world. Now, once you centralize power, and this is what Marxism does, this is what fascism does, which are basically expressions of the same thing if we really look at them. Once you centralize power, you are creating a very simple situation. You are giving control over the vast majority to a tiny few. And you are hoping that they're benevolent, you're hoping that they will use that power wisely. History tells us they never do. Once you have centralization of power, you have abuse of power. And what we've been looking at through human history is the incessant centralization of power. We were in tribes once, loads of tribes were brought together under nations. Now they're bringing loads of nations together under the European Union. And now they're talking about wanting a world government, which is what I predicted they would want 30 years ago. And we're in a situation now where globalization is the total expression of what I'm talking about, where the number of people who hold the real center of power in the world, never mind Britain, is tiny. Is tiny.
Assuming we actually face the climate emergency, we would all be doomed if we had to rely on the EPA and the United Nations or the Green New Deal to save us. So it's a way to transform the economy, massive wealth redistribution, massive central planning, with literally beam counters affecting every aspect of your life.
And this is the result, Madam Acting Deputy President, of federal agreements with UN treaties, protocols, declarations, agreements, such as the 1975 Lima Declaration. And then we had in 1992 the UN's Rio Declaration for 21st Century Global Governance. Then we had the 1996 UN Kyoto Agreement, which I've discussed, which led to the theft of property rights. Then we have the 2015 UN Paris Agreement. That was not an agreement, just an agreement for every nation to do what they wanted to do.
This is a massive movement, and its real intentions are being masked with environmental issues. The bad news is this structure was set up by those who want to establish a global government system. They've set this structure up years ago. This is why I keep saying to you, you don't have any idea how far behind we really are. Far behind.
Yeah, I think the first real awakening is like what we always say when people play the climate simulation, the Sea Roads climate interactive simulation. If you really watch how that works, you come to one overarching conclusion. One, we got to get going, and however fast we're going, we got to go faster. Faster, faster. But two, it's about everybody. You know, it is ultimately about the underdeveloped world, because if they stay on the same path as the developed world, in 30 years, they start to become significant emitters.
Morality is improving the lives of people. That means inexpensive and ready access to food, to energy. From that perspective, the policies proposed are the essence of immorality. And I find it truly bizarre. Here's somebody who's distorting science, following the path of fascists in the past, who is proposing policies that will be harmful for millions of people. And he assumes he has the moral high ground, and the people who are opposing this don't seem to recognize they hold the moral high ground.
I predict, and this is my sincere prediction, that 10 years from now, certainly 20 years from now, people will look back on this and they'll say, what the hell was going on? What got into these people? Why did the world turn crazy about global warming? It's a non-problem. It's fiction.
Environmental groups have effectively created a public image as organizations caring for helpless species and protecting environments. This has allowed them to implement an agenda in America that, if fully exposed, would be opposed by the majority of the people. In fact, most people supporting these organizations are not aware of their long-term objective, even though it is no secret.
I'd now like to quote from the UN Agenda 21 book that is driving this. Maurice Strong, the Secretary General of the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, he said, quote, in the preface, in the foreword to this instruction, there is much to be done, and I look to the new United Nations Commission on Sustainable Development to be the focal point for the massive effort needed to create the new era of international cooperation for the new global partnership that will make this shift possible. So we're talking here about a global governance from the UN. Agenda 21 stands as a comprehensive, this is the UN's words, Agenda 21 stands as a comprehensive blueprint for action to be taken globally from now into the 21st century by governments, United Nations organizations, development agencies, non-governmental organizations and independent sector groups in every area in which human activity impacts on the environment. And that means every area of human livelihood, human existence. The agenda, it goes on to say, the agenda should be studied in conjunction with both the Rio Declaration, which provides a context for its specific proposals, and the Statement of Forest Principles, which is embraced by the UN. It is hoped that the Forest Principles will form the basis for a future international level agreement. The United Nations and Maurice Strong, who was the head of that entity at that time, that particular part of the UN, has admitted to pushing for an unelected socialist global governance.
In September 2015, all 193 UN member states adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. They recognize that ending poverty calls for transforming our world through strategies that build economic growth, address social needs, and ensure environmental protection. To achieve this vision, 17 Sustainable Development Goals, known as SDGs, were defined as part of the 2030 Agenda. The SDGs and their targets balance the three dimensions of sustainable development: economic, social, and environmental, working in partnerships and calling for action by all countries. The goals are integrated and indivisible.
Take a look at the wildlands map. It defines where environmentalists want to take America in the very near future. The areas in red will be off limits to humans. The areas in yellow represent buffer zones, where limited use is allowed primarily to travel to and from populated areas. The areas in green are where normal use by humans will be allowed. However, by the environmentalists' own admission, these normal use areas would be restricted. When this plan was first published in 1992, the author, Reed Noss, explained how their agenda would affect the human population. He stated, eventually a wilderness network would dominate a region and thus would itself constitute the matrix, with human habitations being the islands.
At European level, landowners' interests are represented in Brussels by the European Landowners Organization. Restoring biodiversity is one of the group's concerns.
The ELO has become involved in Natura 2000 because it represents one of the most essential aspects of the life of rural landowners, who have always developed and respected the quality of the environment. Even if Natura 2000 can be a constraint, it offers many opportunities, and that is what we try to highlight and develop by participating with civil society, NGOs, and political leaders in the development of a sustainable network acceptable to all the partners.
Preserving or restoring biodiversity and the ecosystem in different habitats, from the countryside to mountains to the marine environment. That is the main objective of the European Natura 2000 network.
I think it's fair to say that if Natura 2000 didn't exist, in fact I'm definite of this, I would not be sitting here now. And the reason why I say that is because I got involved in European politics because we had a situation in Ireland whereby we had a top-down decision imposed on us without any consultation. That's the way we seen it on the ground. And the first time many of my neighbours heard of Natura 2000 was when the police were threatening to arrest them for taking fuel from their bogs. Now, some people mightn't think that's the best way to get fuel for your house, but we had done it for hundreds of years. You can argue whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but we were doing it. And that's the way we heated our house. And I would now be speaking with an English or a London accent if it wasn't for that method of producing fuel, because my father, in some people's eyes, would be the ultimate sinner. He brought it home for people. So you can imagine our shock and horror when we discovered that we would potentially face a €500,000 fine and up to 5 years in prison, longer than in many cases you get for rape in my country, for doing something we had done for centuries. We can argue whether it's wrong or right, but that's not what I'm arguing. I'm having a discussion here or trying to tease out how this would work better. And I tell you for definite, it would have worked better if people had been consulted with in advance, and they were not consulted. And it resulted in a situation, and hopefully people can learn from this, where we had hundreds and hundreds of people in a bog one night with members of our police force, with machine guns, with assault rifles, attempting to stop people using their land. Whether they're right or wrong to use it, we can have that debate, but I think we would have to conclude that the implementation didn't go too well.
Seizing private property. You may have heard of eminent domain, whereby the government, federal, state, or local, can seize private property if there is a need for the public good, they say. Now, the government has to pay for it, but they can take it away from its rightful owner if the rightful owner won't sell.
This ordinance is the biggest threat our 100-year-old family farm has ever faced. It imposes unnecessary regulations on our land that will mandate a conservation easement with no compensation. The precedent that this sets is that the government can come in and take away private land with zero compensation. It's un-American. It's un-American.
The abolition of private property. We see that beginning to happen right now. Roads are being closed. Forests are being more limited. And the idea here is that you stack and pack people in metropolitan areas, you put them on public transportation, and you never let them outside. So the wildlands gets protected in that fashion. This is why the pressure is mounting on landowners across America. Soon that battle is going to shift into suburban neighborhoods, and the battle for the resettlement of our suburban neighborhoods will begin. Agenda 21 will not stop its process until all the world is collectivized. Human beings are to be congregated in smart growth communities. That's why you see in every community in California and across the country the push for walkable communities, which means you live on the 20th floor and you walk downstairs, where smart growth cages are really built for the American citizens. And we thought the one way in and one way out of Polish cities was a dangerous mistake. Well, smart growth is designed to take control over all human action. Now, a subset of the Wildlands Project allows for certain limited uses by certain special people, not to include the general public. But in general, the wildlands, as opposed to the smart growth proposals, which have to do with metropolitan development, the Wildlands Project is the idea to suck all the people into these metropolitan areas and to leave the wildlands free for the animals to roam. South San Jose is a good example of what's become, or is becoming, a wildlands project. South San Jose is called the Coyote Valley, and gee, some coyotes like to cross that valley, and some other animals as well. And so that's off limits to development. And we're seeing that kind of activity happening everywhere across this country. And it's only going to get a lot more profound as time moves along. Wildlands Project is a massive undertaking. Take rural lands and put it off limits to human beings. World government is the program behind the Democrat Party and Republican Party sponsored Agenda 21 program. Your local politicians are paid by parties who support the globalization, including the destruction of America. Because the programs of sustainable development have been in process for a lot longer than simply since 1992. But the acceleration since then has been overwhelming.
Anybody here heard about Agenda 21? Well, some. You need to all know about it. It's a code phrase. It's the title of the program for collectivism, global collectivism, which was designed at the United Nations and is being implemented as we speak in every country of the world, at least where the UN has an interest in implementing it, in the more advanced nations. And it's being done under the guise of environmentalism. They're using the label of, let's be concerned about our planet Earth. Our planet Earth is being destroyed. We're losing our natural resources. Everything is going bad in the environment. We've got global warming. We've got all these things. We've got pollution. So therefore, what we need is more laws. Surprise. More laws, and especially at the international level, to regulate and control these things and take away the personal freedoms that you and I have over our own property, because we need to do it for the greater good of the greater number. We need to do it to save the world. And it's being coordinated at the United Nations.
No one, not even the longtime opponents of the environmental movement, believed such a transforming agenda was possible. However, it is being implemented quickly through innocent-sounding programs that most Americans support. Wilderness areas, critical habitat for endangered species, wetlands, roadless areas, national heritage areas, and other restrictive programs are sold to the public as necessary to protect nature, or as assurance that Americans will always have a place to escape from the heavily populated cities. More invented tools and programs, such as conservation easements, smart growth, open space, and greenlining, are being promoted as a way to control growth. What all these programs have in common is extinguishing the private property rights of American citizens and transferring the control of the property to elite land trusts or directly to the government. It will not take the 80 to 100 years they originally projected to complete their task. They are much closer to achieving their goal than anyone realizes. Environmentalists have scared Americans into thinking that if we continue to live as we are today, the Earth will self-destruct, species will die, and the globe will be covered with development. However, government data shows that only 6% of America's landmass is currently developed. Only 3% of America is classified as urban. Yet 77% of all Americans live in these urban areas. The rest is still largely untouched by humans. The problem is not that our nation is being overdeveloped. The problem is as old as time. It is about who will own the land. Large amounts of the nation's natural resources are still owned by private citizens. America's founders vehemently opposed the concept of government or elitists owning the land in America, which would result in the citizens being leaseholders and serfs. One of the most well-known property rights advocate of our time, Wayne Hage, said it best. Either you have the right to own property, or you are property. Make no mistake, this battle is not about whether the land will be used, resources extracted, and wealth created, but by whom. Karl Marx wrote in the Communist Manifesto, "The theory of the communist may be summed up in the single sentence, abolition of private property." America's founding father, John Adams, stated, "Property must be secured or liberty cannot exist." Which course will America take? Environmentalists are counting on their agenda never being fully revealed. Taking Liberty is committed to seeing that it is. Their plan must be stopped before all of our liberty is taken.
I started to have some mind explosions about 2 years ago when certain pieces of the puzzle that weren't supposed to fit together with what I'm going to roll out in this series started fitting together. And I was doing a whole bunch of shows with my colleague Michael Tessarian on Unslaved. And we were talking about the Knights Templar and the history of the Templars and the chivalric orders, the secret societies, the just, you know, how the elites operate, you know, the Vatican.
Completely, and it's authentic. That's what convinced me. One of the reasons I carried on is because I knew it was coming from the highest brow people, some of them that I respect very much, and others I don't respect, but I know that for personal reasons, they didn't want their orders to be overtaken, so they wrote about it, or they leaked it, hoping, you know, for the best. They had the Bavarian government and even the local prince who crushed the Illuminati in Bavaria wrote 24 letters or something about the Illuminati's presence and sent it to all his brethren, you know, royal families in Europe. Those are on record. And I don't remember him saying in one of those, oh, they're all over and done with, you know, like we do today in the 20th century. He was warning his fellow royals because, watch out, they're going to try and recruit you. They're still busy. We just suppressed them here in Bavaria, one small place, right? In Germany. Yeah, well, what about the rest of Germany? What about Austro-Hungary? What about Britain? What about Russia? So the men who knew about the Illuminati never once ever wrote about them disappearing. But today, plonkers in the 20th century are going to tell you there's no such thing as Illuminati. Didn't we just mention people from the 10th century, the Knights Templars and the Hospitallers? The Knights Hospitallers, who are sitting on the United Nations today as we speak, are the oldest society in history. older than the Templars and older than the Cistercians. The Cistercians being way back as well. The Knights Hospitallers that became the Knights of Malta are older. Don't let that confuse you when I said that they became the clerics later on. That was just in-house decisions, you know, when the Templar wealth was handed over. But the actual fact is that the Hospitallers started before, and they were called Hospitallers because they did what? Open hospitals. Well, that to me it sends a shudder up my spine. That's not a very good thing, because these guys were mendicants. They were apothecaries. Let's see where that road would lead you. You're talking about, you know, today's lockdown and the people behind it. Yeah, the Club of Rome, ever heard of them?
The Club of Rome is a global network of independent and renowned thinkers. The Club of Rome analyzes today's challenges facing the world, their root causes, and the possible futures in a systematic and holistic manner. The Club of Rome encourages global debate in order to set in motion actions that by the middle of the century will ensure a more secure, equitable, and prosperous world.
Who and what is the Committee of 300? Well, I've dealt with that. I've told you this is a supranational body that knows no boundaries, respects the laws of no countries. The first time that they were publicly announced was by a German socialist by the name of Walter Rathenau. I'll give you some background of Walter Rathenau. He was the financial advisor to the Kaiser of Germany, and he was also the financial advisor to the Rothschilds, the French family Rothschild. So he must have known what he's talking about. He made an astonishing statement in 1934. He said, there is a committee of 300 men that rule the world. They are known only to each other, and nothing happens without their consent. The goals then, very simply stated, are to make the world over into a one world, new world order, dictatorship, controlled utterly and completely by this Committee of 300. They do it by dint and by virtue of their fantastic wealth and the fact that they control thousands of the top banking institutions, the political organizations, insurance companies, but their strongest arm is called the Club of Rome. Now, when I first heard of the Club of Rome in 1969, I immediately began my investigation. And as Ken told you, all of my investigations have been done on location. Every one of them. The Club of Rome is one of the most insidious, baneful organizations in existence today, which has done intolerable, immeasurable harm to the United States of America. This Committee of 300 told a man called Aurelio Pecci to form this Club of Rome with the main object of bringing down the industries and the agricultural development of the United States. He immediately wrote a paper in which he said there are too many people on the earth, and that the United States, with its industrial development, its agricultural development, is responsible for this curse of overpopulation. And he picked up the documentation for his work from Lord Bertrand Russell, a senior statesman of the Committee of 300. And Lord Bertrand Russell had written a work called The Impact of Science on Society. And if you can ever secure a copy of that book, which I doubt you'll be able to get, you will see in there that he said the world is grossly overpopulated and we have to get rid of at least half of the world's population, and it doesn't matter how we do it. So the Club of Rome was instituted and organized to start an attack on the world's population using the United States as the whipping boy. And they came up with a paper called the Zero Growth Post-Industrial Plan for Industry and Agriculture for the United States of America. 3 days after that plan was accepted as official United States policy by James Earl Carter, I was able to, through my intelligence people, get a copy of this insidious document. Basically what it said was that the middle class in the United States of America had to be destroyed, because in the coming push to a world order, the middle class would be the stumbling block, because history had shown that the peasant class in ancient days, when they had revolted, were just easily crushed. There was no resistance. But now had grown a new super class of people in the United States called the middle class, who had long-term employment, who had job security, who were well paid, who could afford to buy the products that were made by the United States and didn't need to buy products from China or anywhere else. And the Club of Rome post-industrial zero-growth paper said this has got to stop. We have to bring down the middle class of the United States. And the way that we will do this, the way that we will accomplish this task is by crushing their industries. The point I'm trying to make, ladies and gentlemen, is that the federal government, the secret upper-level parallel government that runs the United States, does not want you to know that you have an upper-level parallel government that calls the shots, that dictates what is going to happen to your life and mine.
After having spent 40 years fighting for their message, the authors gathered where the Limits to Growth saga began. Which options do they think we have today?
40 years ago, it was still theoretically possible to slow things down and come to an equilibrium. Now that's no longer possible. We are coming into a period of uncontrolled decline. We need now to start focusing specifically on the issue of resilience. If we go through this period of decline without foreknowledge, without preparation,
in one way or another, we are so far, globally, we are so far above the population and the consumption levels which can be supported by this planet that I know in one way or another it's going to come back down. So I don't hope to avoid that. I hope that it can occur in a civil way, and I mean civil in a special way, peaceful. Peace doesn't mean that everybody's happy, but it means that conflict isn't solved through violence, through force, but rather in other ways. And so that's what I hope for. That we can, I mean, the planet can support something like 1 billion people, maybe 2 billion, depending on how much liberty and how much material consumption you want to have. If you want more liberty and more consumption, you have to have fewer people. And conversely, you can have more people. I mean, we could even have 8 or 9 billion probably if we have a very strong dictatorship, which is smart. Unfortunately, you never have smart dictatorships. They're always stupid. So, but if you had a smart dictatorship and a low standard of living, you can have it. But we want to have freedom and we want to have a high sentence. So we're going to have 1 billion people. And we're now at 7, so we have to get back down. I hope that this can be slow, relatively slow, and that it can be done in a way which is relatively equal, so that people share the experience and you don't have a few rich, trying to force everybody else to deal with it. So those are my hopes. I mean, these are pretty pessimistic hopes, but I mean, that's...
In this video, we will see how the World Economic Forum through its CEO Klaus Schwab are connected to the Vatican. We will see how the WEF executes the Pope's encyclicals Laudato Si from 2015 and Fratelli Tutti from 2020. But first we will listen to what the Catholic priest, Philip Larry, has to say about the World Economic Forum and how Klaus Schwab are trying to get the message from Francis through in the Davos meetings.
And I'm here today with Father Philip Larry, who holds the chair in logic and epistemology at the Pontifical Lateran University. Good morning.
Good morning to you, Michael. The World Economic Forum is a very unique event. where you have a lot of powerful, rich, and influential people. They get together and talk and discuss different issues, and every year, like you said, there's a different theme. Klaus Schwab, who is the founder and the actual president of the World Economic Forum, is convinced that the forum can be used in order to promote good, the good in society, shall we say, and the common good. Like I think Pope Francis mentions in his greeting, sometimes self-interest prevails. Every year he sends a message to the World Economic Forum, which is usually read by Cardinal Peter Turkson, trying to motivate the leaders at the World Economic Forum to think about the good in society, and especially about the common good, so that everybody can benefit as a whole. So he talks about the common good. He talks about what I'm beginning to look at this as Pope Francis capitalism 2.0. But is there a way that we could make capitalism benefit more people at a greater level? So I think that's what Pope Francis is trying to suggest. Was his message accepted and assimilated by everyone? No. There's some people that could care less what Pope Francis says. But again, Klaus Schwab is not one of those. He's very sensitive towards Catholic values, and he is often in the Vatican. He comes to Rome. And I think he's trying to allow the message of the Holy Father to get through to people at an event like Davos.
According to the book, A Partner in Shaping History, 1971 to 2020, published by the World Economic Forum, WEF, reveals that Catholic priests has participated in the forum in Davos since the 1970s, and shows the World Economic Forum's connection with the Vatican. We read on page 29 to 30. At the 1974 European Management Symposium, Dom Helder Câmara, the Roman Catholic Archbishop of Olinda and Recife, Brazil, made a notable appearance, bolstering the forum's role as a platform for provocative yet vital voices. Câmara had been invited to Davos despite the fact that he was considered persona non grata by many governments and business leaders. He had dubbed himself the spokesperson of those two-thirds of humanity who suffer from the unfair distribution of nature's resources. In his address, Dom Helder predicted that developing countries could someday challenge and clash with the leading economic powers. Let's hope by the Almighty God that this confrontation will not force them into using arms. He criticized multinationals for keeping so much of mankind in appalling conditions. He called for a higher social responsibility, fairer wealth distribution, and a reassessment of the false values of a waste society to achieve prosperity for all people. After having provided a platform for the Club of Rome report The Limits to Growth, which attracted a great deal of publicity for the 1973 meeting, the forum intensified its emphasis on environmental issues, inviting Captain Jacques-Yves Cousteau, the renowned French naval officer and undersea explorer, to Davos. The Catacombs Pact. Archbishop Dom Helder Câmara led a group of 40 bishops in a secret meeting at night, on November 16, 1965 in the catacombs of Domitilla, outside Rome on the Via Appia Antica. The catacombs, spread over 17 kilometers underground, served as the location for the signing of a secret document, titled the Pact of the Catacombs, which included 13 points. But it was never sanctioned by the Vatican, until the Jesuit Pope, Francis, was inaugurated on the 13th of March, 2013. Jorge Mario Bergoglio was appointed as the 266th Pope of the Roman Catholic Church and took the name Francis, inspired by Saint Francis of Assisi from Italy. Unlike his predecessors, Pope Francis is not of Italian origin. Interestingly, his appointment as Pope coincided with the signing of the secret Pact of the Catacombs.
92-year-old Father Luigi Battazzi is the last known survivor of a secret pact that experts say may have influenced Pope Francis. Signed 50 years ago at the time of Vatican II by Catholic bishops in this underground church in Rome. Called the Pact of the Catacombs, it vowed to create a poor church for the poor, the same church Pope Francis says he wants today.
I always say that Pope Francis is the new Catacombs Pact.
I give you one example which for me was probably a crucial moment in my life. I traveled for the first time to Brazil. I met a priest who was known at that time as the priest of the poor people. His name was Don Elder Camara. And he brought me to the favelas of Recife, and I was so shocked. And I said, I have to invite this bishop to Davos to tell the people what poverty is. So I invited him to the annual meeting in Davos. But then when I came back in Switzerland, I found out that actually he was forbidden at that time to speak in Switzerland because he was considered to be a communist. And I said, this is for me a test. But then I noticed that many companies told me, if you invite this person who is so much against business, we will not come to Davos anymore. And that's where I had to stand to my values. Even at the risk that I would have to give up the World Economic Forum.
Wow.
But it went very well. I have to say, the audience in Davos listened to him.
So, it's clear how the Archbishop Don Helder Camara had influence over the Davos meetings since the 70s. Now, let's get back to the Catacombs Pact.
Now, this pact had 13 points, and in it, these bishops vowed to avoid wealth or the appearance of wealth, including in what they wore, not wearing rich vestments or loud colors, avoiding gold and silver. They also said they wouldn't accept invitations to extravagant dinners. Now, they also vowed to put pressure on international organizations to help change the economic structures which they said exploit the poor. These are all points that are remarkably similar to Pope Francis's agenda for the Church today.
Let's take a look at the 10th point of the 13 of the Catacombs Pact that Pope Francis signed in 2013. We will do our utmost so that those responsible for our government and for our public services make and put into practice laws, structures and social institutions required by justice and charity, equality and the harmonic and holistic development of all men and women, and by this means bring about the advent of another social order, worthy of the sons and daughters of mankind and of God. Let's compare a quote from the Pope's encyclical Fratelli Tutti, which he wrote in 2020, with a quote from Klaus Schwab's book, COVID-19 The Great Reset, which he also wrote in 2020. Pope Francis's encyclical Fratelli Tutti. Business abilities, which are a gift from God, should always be clearly directed to the development of others and to the elimination of poverty. The right to private property is always accompanied by the primary and prior principle of the subordination of all private property to the universal destination of the earth's goods, and thus the right of all to their use. This is remarkably similar to what Schwab of the WEF writes in his 2020 book, The Great Reset, where he states, first and foremost, the post-pandemic era will usher in a period of massive wealth redistribution, from the rich to the poor and from capital to labor. On the World Economic Forum's website we find a page that says, here's the Pope's prescription for resetting the global economy in response to COVID-19. We can also see it as talking about the common good, which is mentioned around 30 times in the Pope's encyclical Laudato Si from 2015. The Laudato Si encyclical is all about climate change, global warming, and calling for a one-world government to quote-unquote, combat the calamities. Let's welcome Greta Thunberg, who is also a Jesuit puppet, promoting the Pope's Laudato Si encyclical about climate change.
Hi, my name is Greta Thunberg. I'm a climate activist, and I just met with Pope Francis.
God bless you. Continue to walk, okay? Continue, okay?
And he was very kind, and he told us that we should continue like we do now, and he supports the school strike, the big school strike that is happening on May 24th, which also happened to be on the anniversary of Laudato Si. And so I urge you to join the climate strike.
Klaus Schwab also talks a lot about transhumanism and artificial intelligence, but for the sake of the length of this video, I will recommend to check out the event called Humanity 2.0, which was held in the Vatican in 2019. There are many videos to be found from it online, and it seems it is just another part of the Jesuit plan, which Klaus Schwab executes like the climate change hoax.